It's August 22nd, 1987, and all is as it should be in the Melbourne suburb of Lower Plenty. A family of 4 is sleeping. However, they are not safe. There is a sinister presence outside their house, and he is about to make himself known. As they are sleeping, he walks across to their living room window and expertly removes a pane. He creeps inside and walks down to the parents' bedroom, armed with a handgun and knife. On entry, he makes his way to the head of their bed and wakes both of the occupants up. The motive appears to be burglary, and he threatens them with grave consequences should they fail to comply. The scared parents are told to roll over onto their front. The unwanted visitor then ties their hands and feet, blindfolds and gags them with surgical tape, then ushers them into a wardrobe. Once the parents are neutralised, he leaves the room, crosses the hall, and enters the bedroom of their 6-year-old son. While there, he blindfolds and gags him, and then secures him to the bed. Having done this, he made his way to the last occupied bedroom in the house, that of the family's 12-year-old daughter. She was taken out of the bedroom and into the lounge of the house. Over a period of 2 hours, he sexually assaulted the young girl, while taking intermittent breaks. At one stage, he prepared a meal, and then returned to continue his diabolical deeds. After the assault, the young girl was told to brush her teeth and bathe. Having got what he wanted, he told the girl he was leaving. He told her to count to 100 before attempting to free herself and the other members of her family. On hearing the front door close, she undid the constraints, went to her parents' bedroom and freed them. Naturally, police were called, and an investigation commenced. They were able to establish a number of other details. The victim of the attack told police that the attacker had used the phone to call somebody else. During the phone call, he told the unknown recipient of the call to get out of the area, otherwise their children would be harmed. The man called the recipient Bozo before hanging up the phone. A description went out to the media. The man was described as Australian, in his 30s, about 175 centimetres tall, with brown hair and a slim build. He was wearing a balaclava, blue jeans, and a brown tweed sports coat over a blue waterproof zip-up jacket. He was carrying a grey cloth bag, similar to those used at the time by school children for carrying library books. Police looked into who the call was made to. However, they quickly established that no call was made from the house phone. It was clearly a plan which the intruder used to divert the police's attention. Another aspect of the crime that has been released is the knot used by the man to constrain the family. It was commonly used by sailors or by people in the haulage business wanting to secure heavy loads. The calm way he went about his acts raised suspicions that he may have committed a similar crime, and they were able to find a number which may have been linked to the same perpetrator. We will look at these in more detail later. First, we will look at the next case known to have been connected. 16 months later, on December the 27th, 1988, a husband and father, John Wills, was awake in the early hours of the morning. He hadn't been able to sleep, and so got up and began a jigsaw puzzle, with the hope that this might act as a natural soporific. At 5 a.m, feeling tired enough to get some shut-eye, he left his living room and walked up the hallway of his house to the bedroom where his wife Julie was sleeping. He got in beside her and soon drifted off. He did so not knowing that there was a man outside his house, waiting for an opportune time to enter the Wills' residence. This man would soon gain entry through the Wills' back door and walk to John and Julie's bedroom. It was 5:45 a.m. when he walked through the bedroom door. He was instantly noticed by Julie. She let out a scream, warning her children to leave the house. The man told her to keep quiet and neutralised John by placing a handgun to the side of his head. Looking into John's eyes, he calmly said, "Don't be a hero." Recognising that the killer had both a handgun and knife and wanting to protect both himself and his family, John made the decision to comply. Like the parents involved in the 1987 attack, they were told to lie on their stomachs. He then bound their hands and feet using copper wire. The knot was similar to the one used in the previous attack. Once this was done, both were blindfolded and gagged, and the intruder asked them where they kept their money. John motioned his head to a bedside table, and the man walked around, opened the drawer, and took around 35 Australian dollars. He then walked out of the room, cut phone lines, and then entered a room used by the family's 4 daughters, calling out to one of them by name, Sharon. Sharon, who was 11, was blindfolded and gagged. He then gathered some items of clothing located in the room and left the house, with Sharon in his arms. It took John and Julie 15 minutes to free themselves. Both went directly to the room of their daughters. On noticing that Sharon was gone, he tried to call police, but his phone lines had been cut. He therefore ran to the next door neighbours and called the police. While he waited for them, he frantically ran around the neighbourhood in search of his daughter, but there was no trace of her. 18 hours passed with no word. The police gave out a vague description. The man they were looking for was around 20 years old. He was wearing blue overalls and a ski mask. John and Julie were told by police to expect the worst. They had initially speculated that the abduction may have had something to do with a possible ransom, but this wasn't considered likely. Firstly, the neighbourhood was a working class area, and money was not flowing abundantly. Secondly, no contact had been made between the kidnapper and family, nor had he contacted police or the local media. It was therefore seen to be motivated by more sinister intentions. The officer in command of the case publicly stated, "We are still in as much of the dark as we were this morning. The fears are growing all the time." At around 11:15 the following night, a white Commodore Vacationer sedan came close to colliding with another vehicle when turning from Jersey Road, Bayswater, into Mountain Road, a location 8 kilometres or 5 miles southeast of Sharon's house in Ringwood. The vehicle had its headlights off, making it hard for the other driver to see the car. He did manage to avoid the car by veering away from the Commodore. Irate at the near miss, the driver of the car followed the Commodore and pulled up next to it when it came to a set of traffic lights. The occupant turned his head in the opposite direction, making an obvious effort to hide his features. When the lights turned green, the driver drove on and eventually turned right onto Church Street, heading in the direction of Bayswater High School. The driver was able to say that the car was white and had 3 notable blue stripes running down the side of the car. Unfortunately, he was unable to get the vehicle's license plate. The sighting grew in significance when 40 minutes later, a passing motorist came across a relatively young girl walking down Orchard Road near Baywater High School, dressed in what appeared to be green bin bags. The female driver of the car pulled over to ask if the young person was okay. The voice under the shirt replied, "My name is Sharon Wills, and I was taken from my home early this morning. A man left me here and told me to go and ring home." She was wearing green bin bags up to her neck and had a man's shirt pulled over her head, with another bin bag being pulled over this. Police were called first, and then the woman called the distraught family of Sharon Wills. They were soon reunited with their daughter. Though she had been through a terrible ordeal, police were quick to question her. She was able to provide them with many great details, but rather than lead investigators towards the man responsible, they simply served to highlight the lengths he was willing to go to remain undetected. Sharon had been blindfolded during the entirety of her captivity. That's 18 hours. Understandably, there was no description of the man's physical appearance. She did describe him as a straight-to-the-point individual who was, and I quote, soft-spoken. Somewhere in her descriptions, it appears as though Sharon described him as somewhat caring, and as strange as this may seem, considering the horrific nature of his crimes, she also called him gentle. Sharon told police she was given a Vegemite sandwich with milk and lemonade. Before putting her in the car with the intention of dumping her somewhere, he had thoroughly cleaned her, clipped her fingernails and toenails, brushed and flossed her teeth, and at some unknown stage got rid of her clothes. All was done in an obvious effort to destroy any physical evidence which may lead police to him. In subsequent interviews, Sharon was able to give another piece of information. She had heard a number of low-flying planes while with her captor. They quickly realised the similarities of this case to the one in August 1987. They also recognised a number of salient details, suggesting that the attacker may have been responsible for up to 8 sexual assaults in the previous 10 years, though they did not, however, release this information to the public. 6 days after the abduction, the Victoria State Government put up a reward of 100,000 Australian dollars, with the hope someone would come forward with information leading to the conviction of the perpetrator. Police released descriptions of the Commodore spotted before Sharon was set down. They even displayed a car that looked similar. They did receive some calls and had some suspects, but nothing definite came from the campaign. "18 months later, on Tuesday, July 3rd, 1990, another abduction occurred in another Melbourne suburb, this time in Canterbury, a particularly wealthy neighbourhood closer to the city centre. It's 17 kilometres or 10 miles west of Sharon's Ringwood house, and it's known for its wealthy residents. The Linus family was one of those families who lived there. They were well off and originally from the United Kingdom. They were living on Monomeath Avenue at the time, an area populated by politicians and public officials. The family had been in Melbourne for 4 years. Brian Linus, the family's father, was a partner of the accounting firm Price Waterhouse. However, he was due to leave in a few days and return to England, and all of their belongings had been packed. On the night of the events, they were attending a farewell dinner, while their 2 daughters, Fiona, aged 15, and Nicola, aged 13, were at home alone, sleeping. At approximately 11:40 p.m, a man dressed in dark clothing and wearing a green balaclava pried open a back window of the building. He climbed inside, armed with a knife and pistol, and proceeded to the girls' room, where he woke them up and told them to cooperate. Like the previous attacks, he tied up Fiona and told her to pass a message on to her father. The message was, "Tell your father I want $25,000. He then led Nicola into another room and told her to get her school uniform, which he then placed in a bag with some underwear. He then took the keys to a leased vehicle, a navy Berliner sedan parked on the front driveway. Nicola was brought from her home and forced into the car, which was then driven away. 40 minutes after the abduction, Nicola's parents, Brian and Rosemary, returned home. It was around midnight. Instantly, they noticed that the rental car was missing and the front door was ajar. Panicked, they entered the house and found Fiona tied up on her bed and Nicola missing. They immediately called the police and a search was launched. Police officers were stationed at the residence and all incoming calls were monitored in the hope that the kidnapper would call to demand payment. Both parents had said that they were willing to pay. Brian would publicly state, "We would very much like to have Nikki back with us. Whatever can be done to get her back, we would like to be done. Anyone else in this room who has children might well understand the stress when you have seen one of your own family taken away like that. We have to sit and be patient and hold our nerve. There is nothing else you can do. The family feels no anger towards the man, just a feeling of confusion really, as to why someone would do that to such an unprotected, happy young child. She's a normal 13-year-old. She's not a worldly sort of kid. She's not streetwise, but resourceful in a situation like this. Who knows?" The family's rented car was discovered at 3 p.m. on July 4th in Chaucer Street, Canterbury, only a kilometre away from the Linus residence. Police believe that the kidnapping was diligently planned, and that he had stalked and staked the premises for flaws in the preceding weeks. Everyone on the street was questioned, but no one had seen anything noteworthy. Nicola's classmates and faculty at the Presbyterian Ladies' College where she studied were interviewed, but nothing of note was discovered. Forensics were quickly dispatched to the scene, and an examination for fingerprints began. Police also released a description of the perpetrator, who was described as softly spoken, likely in his 30s, and dressed in dark-coloured jeans and a dark sweater. Once again, a $100,000 reward was offered by the Victorian state government for information. Tim Munro, a psychologist, was perplexed by the abduction. $25,000 was a small sum of money for a kidnap, and he did not believe money was the motive. He went on to say, "Whether it was impulsive or planned, the person is a disturbed individual. It is someone who can't empathise with the family or the victim. And he is very directed to his own demands. But he seems to be in touch with reality. There is no indication he is suffering from a psychotic influence. That's probably a good thing. If he's in touch with reality, he'll probably calm down and release the child. The important thing is for him to make contact, so some dialogue can start happening, to establish some rapport and to take the edge out of the situation." Though police suspected that the abduction was carried out by the same person who had kidnapped Sharon Wills, they were not certain. And when Nicola did not return after 36 hours, they began to fear the worst. Brian made public appeals for his daughter's safe return, which eventually occurred when Nicola was found on the 5th of July, her 14th birthday, 50 hours after her kidnapping. She was discovered about 6 kilometres, 3.7 miles, from her home, near an electricity station in Kew. She was fully dressed and wrapped in a beige blanket. Before leaving, the man responsible told her to lie on her stomach until his car could no longer be heard. When she realised he was gone, she sat up and removed the blindfold that had been on her since the ordeal began. It was 2 a.m. She made her way to a nearby house and called her father Brian, who was awake praying for the return of his beloved daughter. Nicola stated that the kidnapper was between the ages of 20 and 40 and wore a dark green ski mask with cream stitching around the eyes and mouth. She also thought he had reddish brown hair. He wielded a serrated knife with a 25cm black plastic handle. The abductor, like Sharon Will's abductor, was meticulous about cleaning. He bathed Nicola and cut her fingernails and toenails before releasing her. In contrast to Sharon, she had been chained to the abductor's bed with a neck brace. She also heard low-flying planes, which confirmed the police's suspicions that the man was the same person. On Saturday, April 13th, 1991, 9 months after the kidnapping of Nicola Linus, a girl named Carmen Chan was at home watching TV with her 2 younger sisters, Carly aged 9 and Karen aged 7, on what would become a fateful night for all. Their house was in Templestowe, an affluent suburb of Melbourne. While they sat watching a documentary about Marilyn Monroe, their parents, John and Phyllis, were working in one of their successful Chinese restaurants. Both were known to work up to 18 hours a day, so it was not uncommon for the children to be home alone. Carmen, as the eldest, was in charge of her siblings' well-being, while her parents were away. But this night would be different from the others. On this night, someone was outside their premises. The police would later notice that the security gates had been tampered with at around 9 p.m, and it was believed the man gained entry at this time. He walked over to a red car in the driveway and began scrawling messages in white paint on it. The messages were aimed at one of the 2 parents, most likely the father, and said things like "payback, more to come" and "Asian drug deal." After vandalising the car, he walked over to a door that was believed to be unlocked and proceeded to make his way to the girl's room. However, they heard something, and Carmen and Carly went out to the hallway to investigate. They were quickly confronted by a man wearing a balaclava, and both were grabbed by the hair and led back into the room, where Karen, the youngest, was curled up behind the door. When he had all the girls under control, he put Carly and Karen in a wardrobe and pushed a nearby bed up against it to keep them inside. He then took Carmen with him and left the house at approximately 9:30 p.m. The 2 other girls managed to escape the wardrobe and quickly called their father. He returned home, called police, and a message was broadcast to all officers in the area. Helicopters were dispatched, streets were patrolled, and sniffer dog teams were deployed. Dogs picked up a scent that led them out a back door, through a garden, down to a gate that led to a tennis court, and out another gate that faced a wall that separated the property from the street. The drop to the street was 2 meters high, but this was clearly how he left, because the dogs picked up a scent on the other side that continued 300 meters. Police believe this is where his car was parked. The sisters described him as a male, Australian, 25 to 30 years old, slim to medium build, 170 to 180 centimeters tall, wearing grey sneakers and a grey-green tracksuit and a balaclava. Before we conclude the first part, it should be noted that Carmen, like Nicola, attended the Presbyterian Ladies' College, and that this aspect will be featured in part 2. We hope you will join us as we investigate. For the time being, take care.